Hello there and welcome back to the booth here at Pro Tour Aether Revolt. That is Ian Duke and I am Marshall Sutcliffe. And we're done with draft. That means that it's time for standard. We're getting really close here as our players are just about set to go. We've got Jelger Wiegersma down in the feature match area from Team D3 Go. And he's playing Black-Green Delirium.
Okay.
His opponent, Salvatto from Argentina, he's on Team Dex Army. He's got a bit of a sweet one here. He's playing Grixis Improvise, and it doesn't stop at Grixis, I'll have you know as well. It kind of dips into a few of those little things. So let's head down to the feature match area. It's time for standard and round 4 here from Pro Tour Aether Revolt. Hello and welcome to coverage of Pro Tour Aether Revolt. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe in the booth with Ian Duke, and it is that time. It's time for Constructed. We're playing standard here in Dublin, and we've got Jelger Wiegersma. Take a look at Jelger there as he patiently awaits our go-ahead to play. His opponent on the other side of the table, that is Salvato from Argentina. He's on Team Dex Army. And we've got an interesting little matchup here, Ian. We've got a deck, at least a version of a deck that we've grown familiar with in Jelger's hand, that is Black-Green Delirium. On the other side of the table, something very new and very different from what we've seen in the past in Standard. We're looking at really a dedicated improvised deck here in Luis's hands.
Yeah, we are. And looking through this deck list, I won't spoil any surprises, but this is something very new, very interesting. So I can't wait to see it in action here.
Yeah, he's got some spicy stuff going on, and I'm curious to see how this deck functions for him. He's going to be facing potentially a lot of resistance here from Jelger. Good old Grimflayer is going to hit the battlefield for Jelger. And yes, take a look at that card on the top of the hand there for for Salvato. That is a Bastion Inventor.
Wait. I thought you said we were done with Limited, Marshall.
We saw a few of those played in the limited portion, and this is actually lining up. Look at what can happen here. He went turn 1 artifact, turn 2, 2 artifacts. Yes, that is a Cogworker's Puzzle Knot, by the way. And he's playing the full 4 of those. He's also got 4 servo schematics as well, so he's really trying to maximize on this exact draw. And you know what can happen? Next turn, he can go land and play one of those Bastion Inventors out of his hand.
Looks like a couple Traverse the Ulvenwalds here for Jelger.
No Delirium, so he's just going to grab some basics. Attack with Grimflayer. Trigger it. Of course, Jelger can put any number of these in his graveyard, and the rest are going to go back on top of his library. This is a powerful enabler, smoothing out your draw, getting you to the things that you want, while also increasing your Delirium count, such that Grimflayer can become a 4/4. By the way, yes, for those of you watching at home, that was a Tezzeret's touch off the top of the deck there for Salvato.
Okay.
He is. There's some spice here, buddy. Let me tell you that. So it looks like he's got the choice between playing a Bastion Inventor or a Tezzeret's touch here. And he's going to go for the Inventor. Yeah. So turn 3, 4/4 hexproof in Standard. Bang. Deal with that, Jelger. And there's a Tireless Tracker for Jelger. We've seen these cards. These are still good cards. You know, just because we have these flashy new toys, many of which Salvato is showing off for us on the other side of the table, you know, it doesn't mean Tireless Tracker is bad. It doesn't mean Grimflayer is bad. These are still solid cards, and this is very much shaping out to be an old versus new matchup. Herald of Anguish was the draw for Salvato.
One of the exciting new payoffs for playing with the improvised mechanic in Aether Revolt.
Another thing that that Luis had to keep in mind when he tapped out last turn was that he's got a Metallic Rebuke in hand, and he may want to leave that up at some point to be able to counter a big threat from Jelger, though. The damage was done. That tireless tracker is going to be a problem for Luis Salvato down the line here, and he did get to resolve that. Luis is looking at a Maverick Thopterist in hand. This deck is something else.
Yeah, so already we can see some of the payoffs here for using the Improvise mechanic. We saw the Bastion Inventor, of course, kind of the limited payoff that we saw earlier today in the limited format. But also Maverick Thopterist is one of the more powerful Improvise creatures, as is Herald of Anguish, which we just got a glimpse at a couple moments ago.
And there it is, Maverick Thopterist. And this is one of the really cool interactions that you get by playing this card, is that he actually can leave up that Metallic Rebuke now. He's going to get 2 Thopters, which are going to each be able to tap. The Spire of Industry there also is going to be able to tap for blue. And it doesn't look like it. Like if you're in Jelger's seat and you haven't played a lot of this matchup, you're not going to know that he can counter one of your spells here, but he can.
Yeah, this is looking like the kind of start that Luis is interested in. Of course, I haven't seen this exact deck list play out before, but I have to imagine things are going according to plan for Luis from his side of the battlefield.
Now, if you're just joining us, you'll also see we've got a new feature on our graphic, the advantage bar. It's just above the life totals. And the little arrows that you see will kind of give you an idea of who's ahead in the game, because sometimes with Magic, if you look at the life totals, they don't tell the complete story. So for those of you wondering about the advantage, that's the advantage bar. You can take a look at that as we move our way through the match. A second copy of Tireless Tracker means that the long game's starting to look better and better for Jelger if he can get to that point.
So interesting, Luis had the option to cast his Metallic Rebuke there and counter the second Tireless Tracker, but decides to hold on to it. Potentially has something very important in mind that he wants to counter, like maybe a Verdurous Gear Hulk the coming turn, or something like a Walking Ballista that could piece apart his Thopters. Those are the kinds of things he might be thinking about saving that Metallic Rebuke for.
Second coup. It's not going to happen.
Jelger is going to attack with a Tireless Tracker. It's going to go unblocked, and so Jelger's going to go ahead and sacrifice one of his clues to get in for an extra point of damage and draw a card.
Go.
Back to you, Luis. Do have a match update for you as well. On one of our back tables, we've got Andrew Cuneo playing against Gabor Coxis, and he's taking down the first game, so Andrew's going to have to win back-to-back games if he wants to win this first match of Constructed.
So Luis, now considering his options, has a number of options at his disposal here, again, because of Improvise, allowing him a lot of flexibility with how he spends his mana. We could see, for example, something like Herald of Anguish come down with Metallic Rebuke back up. Marshall's pointing at a Johnny cosplayer there in the
Love
background.
that. Just checking the Twitter. All right, so here we go. Tezzeret's Touch is going to turn that Cogworker's Puzzle Knot into a 5/5. And if it goes to the graveyard, Luis will get it back into his hand, and bang! He's smashing.
Okay, I like this.
I love this.
He's a W2, right?
Jelger's taking a long look at his blocking options. Right now, he's only got 2 creatures back. And he's looking at his hand and trying to figure out, all right, how does this actually play out?
So we've got, looks like 13 potential damage coming in on the side of Luis Salvato. Now, of course, we may see Tireless Tracker jump in front of the Maverick Thopterist, for example. But still a lot of damage coming through.
That's the thinking phase for Jelger. He knows that this is a key juncture in this game.
And now Jelger's got to think about, do I want to turn this game into a race and, maybe try to play my Verdurous Gearhulk next turn and crack back for some more damage and try to outrace Luis. But we know that Luis is actually sitting on that Metallic Rebuke still, able to cast that off of the servo that he left back.
Yep, he's at 12 life. And he really has turned this into a race. The interesting part is that if Jelger tries to cast something pre-combat, that could get countered.
So this is interesting here. Ruinous Path on the servo. Now, normally that wouldn't be a super big deal, but that actually shuts off Luis's ability to cast Metallic Rebuke. It's his only untapped artifact.
Also, he's going to be facing lethal here, right?
Yeah.
Like, if Jelger just sacrifices a clue, he'll have 4/8. Assuming that he has Delirium here.
Second clue.
Take one. Sacrifice this.
Ah, that was the trick that Luis had in his
That's a circle.
back pocket here. He left up the white mana
very
to be able to
nice.
sacrifice a Cogworker's Puzzle Knot. I don't think Jelger saw that. I didn't see it right away either. And that leaves him a 1/1 servo to chump block one of the Tireless trackers. And you can see the look on Jelger's face. He is not happy with how that turned out.
Yeah, I mean, either Jelger didn't see it or he thought his only chance to win the game was that Luis didn't see it.
Yeah.
Right, so one of those two. But either way, very, very well sculpted by Luis to set up that block there. And then, of course, Luis would have a counterattack for lethal after that.
Wow, good stuff in our first round. We'll be back after these messages.
Put what you've learned from watching the Pro Tour into action and compete to become the champion of your favorite game store. Test your skills and your new standard deck at Game Day. Top finishers are awarded special Game Day prizes, including Full Art Premium promo cards and a champion playmat for the winner. Aether Revolt is now available in Magic Duels. Build endless deck combinations with more than 1,000 unique cards. Play through hours of story with over 50 campaign missions. Play Magic Duels free today on Xbox One, Steam, iPad, and iPhone.
Hello and welcome back to the feature match area here at Pro Tour Aether Revolt. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe. I'm in the booth with my friend and co-worker Ian Duke. We just saw game one between Jelger Wiegersma and Luis Salvatto, with Luis coming up with an unorthodox victory there, slamming in with all of his creatures and kind of slyly leaving back that white mana for his Cogworker's Puzzle Knot.
Yeah, that was a really cool display of this new Improvise deck. I haven't seen much of decks like this so far this season. They're kind of just being explored for the first time, so it's really, really exciting to see them kind of debut here at the Pro Tour. But last game was really impressive. I mean, Luis, virtually exploded there by just playing out tons of artifacts early and leveraging the cost reduction of Improvise.
We saw a turn 3 Bastion Inventor in that game.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
That's good stuff. And you got to do more than that to win in Standard, but that was good. and he did do more than that. Luis is on 6 cards here, by the way, in game number 2. I've got some match updates for you as well. In fact, I can tell you here, Ian, that Pierre Dejon, he's up a game over Mike Sigrist, and that Gabor Coxis was able to defeat Andrew Cuneo. And I'm going to tell you something. All of those wins, those game wins that we see, went to the copycat decks, as we're calling them.
Oh, interesting.
The Sahili Rai Feldar Guardian combo. And yeah, one of them defeating, that was Gabor defeating Andrew. He was on Esper control. The other one is actually 2 different versions of a copycat deck fighting each other with Pierre and Mike.
So here we have a similar start to what we saw last game.
Yep.
Jelger leading off with Grim Flayer, Luis with Servo Schematic, I believe that is.
Oh, that one's the Cogworker's Puzzle.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, but he does have, to your point, he has 4 of each.
Right, and then functionally very similar in his deck.
Yeah, the one difference,
as we saw last game,
did become relevant last game. But yeah, they're there for the same reason, and the reason's simple. They're making 2 artifacts on turn 2. That's what he wants. He's going to miss a land drop here. This is going to be tough for Luis on this mulligan here. Also, we see no Spire of Industry this time.
Yeah, based on what we saw from last game, it seems like this matchup is a lot about speed. With Jelger's deck, sort of the classic Black-Green deck presenting the best individual cards it can, just playing all high card quality and, maybe less on synergy as compared to Luis's deck, which is very, very synergy focused, really needing the right cards and the right draw to kind of explode out of the gates here.
Looks like a fatal push here from Luis Salvato to take down a Grim Flare. Also, there's our first Winding Constrictor. There's one in the graveyard in game 1, but now we got one on the battlefield. Hopefully we'll get a chance to see what that can do. But Fatal Push, certainly one of those cards that was destined to make an impact. Ooh. How about 2 Winding Constrictors to go with a Walking Ballista?
Wow. So
that
Walking Ballista, the card we're going to see a lot of here this weekend. This is, has been touted as the best card or the most standard defining card out of Aether Revolt. We'll see if that proves to be true, but certainly a great combination with Winding Constrictor coming in with additional +1/+1 counters. And it strikes me as a card that's really, really strong against Luis Salvato's deck. He's able to take out those Thopters, take out those Servos, and every time he does that, he's essentially denying Luis mana.
So it looks like Jelger's going to attack for 6 and then pass priority, and Luis is going to use his second copy of Fatal Push just to take out the Walking Ballista. Now, unfortunately for Luis, of course, Jelger gets to say, yeah, well, you're going to take an extra 2 off of this anyway, just to use up those counters. And there's another Grim Flare as well for Jelger. So it's all green, black 2-drops for him, but this is really slipping away from Salvato quickly.
Yeah, this is not the style of game that Luis wants to play. He wants to be the one that's accelerating out huge things, and then maybe backing them up with utility spells like Metallic Rebuke or like Fatal Push, but instead, being on the back foot here and not being proactive, instead being forced to just use those Fatal Pushes defensively is not where Luis wants to be.
Yeah, and you can see he's getting smashed here as a result. Also, highly synergistic deck from Salvato, where he really does need specific pieces to come in specific parts, because he's not playing these cards for power level. You're not playing Servo Schematic in your deck because of its power level. You're playing it because it lets you cast 6 drops on turn 3.
Get a clue.
And this game's just about done. And this game's done. So, Jelger Wiegersma is going to take down game number 2 and force a game 3. Jelger says, yeah, that's how I drew it up. You miss your third land drop a couple of times, and I play a bunch of spells. Luis is going to have to consult the sideboard there, but you know, he's not going to be able to take away too much from that loss, just shuffle up and go to game 3.
Yeah, so interestingly seeing, you know, a couple different flavors, a couple different ways to play Standard there. You know, both the heavy synergy on the one side, taking a quick win in game 1, and then followed by just, you know, card quality, basically. And a nice curve, taking the win for Jelger in game 2. So we'll rejoin that match in just a few minutes here, but as they're shuffling up, we'll take a peek here at our other table.
Yeah, Pierre Dejon versus Mike Sigrist. And I mentioned it, this is a copycat mirror, though it's really not. We have one, I'll tell you the deck names, and you can decipher from there. 4-color Aetherworks Copycat.
Okay, I'm with you.
Which is a heck of a name. The other one is Jeskai Copycat Control. That one's in
okay,
Mike
so
Sigrist's hand.
You know, we were talking about different flavors of Standard. These are a couple different flavors of the Saheeli Copycat deck. And this is a deck that's sort of emerged over the last couple of weeks here. We've seen it in the Open Series here in North America. And, you know, there's definitely a couple different ways to take it. You know, you can play sort of a controlling shell, you know, with, you know, removal spells and sweepers and stuff like that in sort of a Jeskai control shell. Or you can take a more combo-oriented approach, you know, in particular using Aetherworks Marvel as an extra way to dig for whichever combo pieces you need. And no matter how you take it, there's just a lot of little synergies that can pop up in this deck. Felidar Guardian capable of, you know, blinking everything from, you know, oaths like Oath of Jace, Oath of Nissa, and so on, to even blinking your Aetherworks Marvel and getting additional uses out of that. So there's lots and lots of potential for synergies in this deck and lots of different ways you can take it.
We do see Felidar Guardians on both sides of the battlefield here as well.
Sorry. Your turn.
So things get downright scary with both players here having Felidar Guardians.
Yeah, and what Pierre's done here is he's passed the turn and left Negate available in the hopes that he can stop the combo from happening.
You know, and despite the speed with which this combo can potentially go off on turn 4, often the way these games play out, especially in the mirrors, is there's a lot of potential for interaction. You know, you need Negate as a potential card there, but actually, you know, any removal spell or even Shock can potentially break up the combo.
Sure.
So this is actually going to play a little bit more, potentially, like a control matchup, where the players are kind of jockeying for position and trying to set things up, maybe constrain the opponent on mana, and try to set up a turn where, you know, maybe one piece of interaction isn't enough to break up the combo.
Fuck.
When you talk about breaking up the combo, by the way, using cards like Shock, can you run that down for people that haven't seen the combo go? Because, you know, they'll probably look and say, well, Felidar Guardians 4 toughness, why do I care about Shock?
Right. So the basic idea of the combination is if you have a Felidar Guardian in play, so 1/4 creature that, you know, when it enters the battlefield, it can essentially blink something else out of the battlefield and back into it. You add Saheeli Rai to the mix, and Saheeli can make a copy of the Felidar Guardian, which then enters the battlefield and can blink Saheeli out and return her to the battlefield with 3 loyalty. Then she can use her -2 ability again to make another copy, which then blinks her back out and back in again, and so on. So you, essentially, each time you go through that cycle, you get to make an extra 1/4 Felidar Guardian.
With haste.
With haste, right? And then you attack your opponent for however many cats you made. But ways that combo can get broken up, for example, are either killing the Felidar Guardian in response to Saheeli's activation, or allowing the Felidar Guardian to get copied, but then killing Saheeli before she's able to blink out and back onto the battlefield. And that's where a card like Shock can take out the Saheeli while she's on 1 loyalty before she comes back at 3 loyalty.
I've even seen people look at using Implement of Combustion for that reason.
Yep.
It does break up the combo, and you can just leave it sitting there like, hey, you know, you could play that on turn 1 and just say, as long as I'm willing to leave up this mana, you're not going to be able to combo off. Ooh, Spell Queller here for Mike Sigrist. And we're going to see the combo unless Pierre Dejon has another answer here, another negate or something.
No, yeah.
Those are the two pieces. That's what you want to see if you're playing standard these days. And it has resolved. Now he's going to need a way to interrupt. And that does it. Mike Sigrist is going to combo off. And it didn't take long, did it, before we saw our first copycat deck go infinite and pick up a game win there. That was not, of course, the match, though. That was game number 2 going to Mike Sigrist. So we are going to get a game 3 between those players. And assuming that this one doesn't take too long, we'll jump back over if they're still playing. But boom, right away. First round of standard and a couple of games in, and we've already seen Copycat do its thing.
That's right. Certainly won't be the last time. I can guarantee you that.
Right, servo schematic here on turn 2 for Salvato. Passes the turn back, and nice little start here for both players. They're both kind of doing the thing that they want to do on turn 2.
Looks like Luis already in a better mana situation than we saw him in last game.
He's kind of a little bit flooded on these. He's got another servo schematic in his hand, and he just cast a Cogworker's Puzzle Knot as well. So, you know, these on their own are not high-impact plays. You know, he spent a total of 4 mana and generated himself a whopping 2 servo tokens. You know, it's not exactly going to keep up in standard, but it could lead to explosive turns down the line here.
Yeah, and we already see Salvato has access to Metallic Rebuke in his hand here. So that could come down and counter Jelger's turn 3 play, you know, via Walking Ballista, Tireless Tracker, what have you.
He can even block with his tokens and still have the extra artifacts available for that Metallic Rebuke.
Yeah,
that
I like
is
it.
Cool. Are we going to see him just go throw a double block in here?
Yeah, I like it. Stop that Grim Flare from connecting and smoothing Jelger's draws.
And then just basically counter whatever he does here.
Yeah, I like countering this too.
Yeah, there we go. Metallic Rebuke.
Okay, so nice little start here for Luis. The only thing he's really missing is a follow-up threat. So we'll see what he can bring off the top here.
Well, that's not it. That's that other servo schematic I mentioned. I think he's down to lands in hand. So, yeah, he's got a swamp and a mountain. So, you know, I mentioned this in game 1 with them, is that being such a heavy synergy deck, he really does need to line up enablers with payoffs and enough disruption to make it all work. Where Jelger's like, I just cast spells. It doesn't matter which ones I cast. They're all good. They all do their job, and I'm just going to keep casting threats and answers and make that work. And you see that here. Now he's taking turn 4, even after having a Grimflayer countered last turn to play a Winding Constrictor and a Walking Ballista, and he's going to take down the servo as well.
Yeah, and sadly after that nice turn 3 exchange from Luis, I think things have really swung back in favor of Jelger here. I would have loved to see like a Maverick Thopterist or something along those lines.
Well,
for
he
Luis
just drew one.
3.
So.
Okay, well, there you go.
Is one turn
too late?
Yeah.
Yep. Could have come out last turn if he had it. And now, unfortunately for him, he's staring down that Walking Ballista, which can start accruing counters rapidly here with the Winding Constrictor.
Right, so Jelger can pay 4 mana to put a +1/+1 counter on the Walking Ballista, but it'll get an additional one as well.
Right.
And if he does that, well, there goes the 2 Thopters, for example.
Yep, indeed.
And he gets to keep the Walking Ballista around. It's really tough spot for Luis.
Yeah, I have to imagine Walking Ballista is one of the cards like Luis absolutely does not want to see in this matchup. And unfortunately for him, he kind of drew the wrong mix of stuff there. Too many enablers there, and really not enough payoffs.
That's right. He had that 1 turn window to really kind of slam something big, but he didn't have it. And Vigersma with the noxious Gear Hulk sort of looming on the horizon. He's got a natural state that doesn't have a great target at the moment, but could come in handy, and then a murder for anything really scary. In the meantime, though, he's going to go ahead and put the 2 +1/+1 counters on his Walking Ballista pre-combat, make sure that that thing's not going to die. That clears the way for the attack with no good blocks from Salvato. He knows that the Winding Constrictor can get in for 2, and I'm just curious to see if Jelger takes down the Thopters now or if he waits. It's going to wait. Another Maverick Thopterist off the top for Salvato. But those are just not matching up super well against what Jelger's
seems to
doing.
be a losing battle here. At least from a card advantage perspective, right? In the sense that Luis is spending a card every time he's trying to make this Maverick Thopterist, and it's 2 Thopters, and then Jelger can just simply spend 4 mana to take out the Thopters each time.
And I think Jelger's quite happy to do that, as he's really just not under any significant pressure otherwise. You can also get an idea for why Jelger waited there. He had a 3/3 blocker holding back, the Walking Ballista holding back the Maverick Thopterist. And so Luis didn't attack with it. So he only attacked with his Air Force, and then Jelger killed his guys. That's why part of the reason why he kept the counters up and didn't use it on his turn. He's going to repeat that here.
Yeah, Walking Ballista, just such a flexible card. So many little tricks you can do with it. Helps you maneuver in combat. Helps make sure trades are favorable. Very, very versatile. So back to Luis's turn here. I think, he'd really love to see something like Herald of Anguish. Just something big and powerful that isn't going to die to the Walking Ballista.
God, it would be so good right here.
Yep.
Could knock a card out of Jelger's hand. Jelger finds another Whining Constrictor. It was a Metallic Rebuke drawn for Luis Salvatto last turn. He is going to be able to leave that up, and with any luck, he'll be able to counter the Noxious Gearhulk at some point. Could have gone for a double block there, decides not to. Again, Jelger has the ability to put counters on his Walking Ballista at will and start firing things down.
Ooh. Second Winding Constrictor.
He needs a land drop. Oh, he didn't hit it. Doesn't need it. I probably overstated that, but that would have been sweet if he had it.
Yep.
Pioneer off the top of the deck for Salvato. Does that help him here?
Not too much.
No, really, does it?
I mean, this is the turn where he really would have loved to see the Herald of Anguish, right?
Oh, yeah.
To take out that Walking Ballista.
In the meantime, Jelger's just going to gobble up one of these Maverick Thopterists and drop from 20 to 18. Not a big deal. And there's that Pioneer that Luis had drawn. He still has Metallic Rebuke and a Mountain in hand, but things are looking good for Jelger still, I have to say. Jelger's thinking about something here. This is going to make Luis pause and say, what does he have? What kind of removal spell does he have? In this case, it's a murder, but that long pause indicated that he had something he was considering. Luis gets to see what it is in this case.
Yeah, and this is a situation where Jelger's just so far ahead. Like, I mean, he doesn't really need to murder Pioneer here. He can just kind of sit back and build up counters on Walking Ballista and answer them that way. But he's got tons of cards in his hand. He's way ahead. He's got Luis sort of on the ropes here as far as the battlefield's concerned, at least. Now Walking Ballista taking up 3 counters at a time.
Unbelievable.
Yep.
Yeah, this game's going to be over very quickly. And Jelger also doing a really good job of playing around the Metallic Rebuke. He's just using his mana in an efficient, good way that just doesn't interact with Rebuke in any way. Another land off the top for Luis Salvatto, and things are really looking bad for him at this point.
Yeah, it's getting to the point where even if Luis, could sculpt his draws perfectly from here, I'm not sure that he could even beat what Jelger has on the board and in his hand.
Agreed. Yeah, Luis's deck is meant to be explosive. It's designed to be explosive. It is not designed to come back from being behind. And the pressure is mounting very heavily here. Jelger's going to attack with all 3 creatures. It looks like the Maverick Thopterist is going to chump block, and then Jelger's just going to pass. He doesn't want to tap that mana and lose his Walking Ballista to some random bird spell, a shock, something like that. If he wanted to play a creature instead, for example, he's got, a Noxious Gearhulk in hand. He could have, but no good target for it. We'd rather just keep the Ballista around. It's better anyway. And Luis Salvatto says, I am not getting out of this mess. And he's just going to extend the hand. At 18 to 16 life, this is where the advantage bar comes in handy, right? Because if you're relatively new to watching high-level Magic, you think, well, it's 18 to 16. Heck, he's ahead. And then they're all of a sudden they're extending the hand. And that's because he had fallen so far behind the board. And like you said, it was going to be really difficult for Luis Salvatto to find his way out of that. So the Hall of Famer, Jelger Wiegersma from Team D3 Go, is going to take down that match. And that leaves us with these guys. There's Mike Sigrist. He's on Team Channel Fireball Ice. And Pierre is on Opportunity. Good name for a team.
Yeah, I like that.
Thinking about trying out for Team Divination, but
Oh, you're liking the card draw aspect of that name. I
Yeah.
thought you meant like, well, you know, the team league is new, and you know, there's a lot of opportunity for
no, but
innovation.
I was
and-
in-step drawing for.
Okay. I see where it's at.
But I place myself appropriately below the team of Opportunity. I'm just a Divination guy. Just give me 2 cards. Speaking of drawing cards, there's an Anticipate for Mike Sigrist. Get through a little bit of filtering there. Tireless Trackers on the other side for Pierre. There is enough mana for a Saheeli Rai here, though I don't believe he has one in hand, and also he'll just get
Good.
killed. So he's not going to play anything, just pass the turn back, but sure that suits Pierre just fine. He's the one who's ahead on board, and the Tireless Tracker gets out of hand very, very quickly.
So we talked earlier on this round about different flavors of the Saheeli Felidar Guardian combo, the copycat combo as we're calling it. These two decks are quite different from one another. Just to give you a character of like sort of what they look like.
Yeah.
Mike Sigrist deck, if you just imagine a Jeskai control deck, you know, he's got Fumigate, he's got some counter spells, he's got removal spells, some card selection, a classic control deck, and then inserted into that control deck is the copycat combo as a win condition. Okay? So it should give you a pretty clear picture of what Mike's deck looks like. Pierre's deck, on the other hand, is more of what you'd think of as a classic combo deck. He's more about, you know, playing around with an energy package that ties into Aetherworks Marvel, and then the Aetherworks Marvel can find the combo pieces. So he's a little bit faster, and he's a little bit more sort of reliant on going for the combo early-ish in the game to win. But of course, now we're looking at a post-sideboard matchup. So both players have configured their decks to be optimal against one another. So we're going to see things like negate in both players' lists. We're going to see the game slowing down a little bit more, a little bit more jockeying, you know, for advantage, trying to pinch your opponent's mana and constrain them to a point where they don't have the right answer at the right time, and then you go for the combo.
Yep. He's going to start things off with the Felidar Guardian, though. Just a land to blink. That is one half of the combo. That is the cat half. Tireless Tracker is going to hit the red zone. It's a pretty free attack because with 2 clues on the battlefield, Pierre can just sacrifice 1 to bring it up to 4 power if Mike were to block. But interestingly, the threat of that happening means that he doesn't have to do it. He can attack just for the 3. Mike can't block. He just says, sure, take 3 and I'll use my mana on something else. Ooh. And oh boy, is he. He's going to get another clue, in fact, by blinking one of his lands. And is he going to be able to leave up negate this turn as well? He is. And these clues are piling up very quickly. So I like the way that this is looking from Pierre's standpoint.
And here goes Mike.
There goes Mike, but it's negate in hand for Pierre Dejon.
And
Mike
back.
has his own negate to fight back, and that's the combo, and that's going to do it. Mike Sigrist.
Wow.
He was not the more dedicated control player out of the 2, as you described, but he had the combo, and he had the way to protect it, and that was it, and the game ended.
Yep, indeed.
How many cats do you think he made?
Probably at least like 700 or something, right?
It's a little low.
I don't know. You think more?
I would have gone for the trillions.
Okay, that's fine.
I mean, you got to pick a number, right? You can't say infinite because you can't do infinite. It is actually a tournament rule that you can't say I'm going to make infinite cats because, you know, at some point somebody might say I'm going to gain so much life, you know, and if you can't both say infinite, you both have to stick on a number at some point. But
all right, so I'm a 700 kind of a guy. You're a 1 trillion kind of a guy. Let's see where it breaks.
We have the number. Tim Willoughby down in the set said 17 million was the number from Mike.
Okay,
Sigrist.
I like it.
That does it for our first round of Standard. We've got more rounds coming up, but for now, let's go to the news desk and Rechagan.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the news desk. Rich Hagan here, welcoming you to the back end of round number 4. The first round of standard, the first round where we've seen the combo in action. Jelger Wiegersma we saw winning there over Luis Salvatto, and we've just seen Mike Sigrist win with a counterspell war, love those, against Pierre Dejon, who recently picked up his second Pro Tour top 8. Meanwhile, some results coming in from Team Last Samurai. One of 4 Pro Tour Hall of Famers is Makihito Mihara, the 2006 world champion. Got all his way to 9 mana and Dragonstorm to storm his way to victory there. He is at 4-0. Liga Magic, that's the second of the Dex Army squads. There's Dex Army, there's Liga Magic, that's their number 2, and then there's Dex third. Liga Magic's captain is Pedro Carvalho of Brazil. He's got a Pro Tour top 8 to his name, and he is 4-0. So too is Tomohiro Saito from Team Harayuya. They're 4-0. And Ben Rubin of D3 Go. That's the team that also features Tom Martell amongst their pod of the Old Pantheon at 4-0. Now, Chen Nguyen, he is at 4-0. That's a group called Fire Squad, not a particularly known group. That's one of the teams they're trying to get to 11-5 for any of their members to come back for another crack at this at Pro Tour Amonkhet. And then Gabor Coxis, remember, it's not all about teams. We've got 192 players on teams. That means we've got half the field just playing for themselves. So Gabor Coxis, who is the lone representative of Hungary, for example, he is 4-0. From China, Xiaoxi Zhang is 4-0. Met up with them on the way here from GP Prague. And they were super excited to be coming to the Pro Tour. You know, it's such a big deal, especially for players who spend so much of their time watching the coverage, seeing it all play out, and then instead of just seeing faces behind them, it's them in the shot in the background. So well done, Xiaoxi Zhang of China, 4-0. Arnaud Baglin of France is doing very well. Now, he isn't team affiliated, but someone from France who is, from Team Magic Corsairs Crew, is Elliot Bousseau. Now, he's at 4-0, and that's part of the reason that Magic Corsairs Crew are doing so well. So behind me, we're about a minute and a half away from the end of the round, but that still means then, for those who are not familiar, we go into extra turns, 5 extra turns to try and determine as many of the matches as we can. And watching the results continuing to pour in, let's see who else is 4-0. Victor Fernando Silva of Brazil has got to 4-0. Tim Wu has defeated Javier Dominguez. So Dominguez at 3-1. Tim Wu up to 4-0. He's been struggling a bit physically. He's been around in a cast on his foot, but sitting there playing Magic, not getting in the way at all. He is 4-0. Pierre Sommen of France is just turning into a good weekend early for the French players. Pierre Sommen of France is at 3-1, as in Paul Yim, Su Wang Yim, who's just defeated Shota Yasuoka, part of Team Masashi. Now, on the floor right now is one of the greatest players of all time. Paulo Vitor could have found his way onto any team at all that he wanted, for sure. Arguably the 3rd best player of all time, behind Kai Buddha and John Finkel. I'm glad to say that PVDDR is with us right now, down on the floor with Brian David Marshall.
Thanks, Rich. That's right. I'm here with Paulo Vitor, the Pro Tour Hall of Famer, Pro Tour champion. Paulo, how has the Channel Fireball Ice tournament been going so far? A little less than halfway through day 1.
Well, we've been doing pretty well. I know that in draft we had 5 2-1s and 1 3-0, so like 70-something% win rate, which is pretty good. And I'm not sure how we did in the first constructed round because I just got done with my match. But I know as a whole, our testing team did well, so we're hoping that includes the members of Channel Fireball Fire. Ice.
Now, what was the secret to your success in draft? How did you guys prepare for this limited format? Like, what was? Did you do a lot of like 8-person drafts, or did you do a lot of online drafts? How did you guys attack this format and break it down so that you guys could be so successful here at the tournament?
Well, we mostly just played a lot, and each person had different opinions. I think our biggest conclusion that we reached was that you want to take enablers higher than payoffs. So, for example, you wouldn't want to take a lot of improvised cards before you had a lot of cheap artifacts. It was better to start with the cheap artifacts. And I think that was basically it. That was our strategy. Other than that, just normal drafting. You know, try to be in the open colors, take good cards. Nothing really special.
Now, have you guys gotten a chance to sort of get a sense of, take the temperature of the room? How do you feel you guys nailed this standard format?
I don't know if we did. I mean, we're playing a pretty standard deck. We're playing Mardu vehicles. You know, it's pretty normal. There's nothing special about it. And it's not a deck that really loses to anything or crushes anything. It's got game against everybody. So we're not going to be in a scenario like last PT where, you know, we looked around, it was all Marva. We're like, okay, we cannot do well in this PT. Like, we're already drawing dead to win it. So, yeah, I don't know. I have to look around a little bit more.
Let me ask you a question. What would it take for you? You know, we have 2 weeks of standard before we get to the Pro Tour. There's usually a best deck. There was clearly a best deck as of last weekend. What would it take for you to be playing that deck once you hit the standard rounds of a Pro Tour? I get the feeling that's a position you don't want to be in.
Well, yeah, ideally you have the best deck that no one else has, and not the best deck that everyone else has. I almost, like, in my mind, the best deck before this PT is Jeskai Sahili. It's, I think, the most powerful of the normal decks. But the main problem that we had with it was that it was weak against the aggro strategy as a whole. So we found that we could beat the hate, like Authority of the Consuls, Lost Legacy. Those cards you could actually beat, so I wouldn't worry about that. But there was a macro archetype that was good against it, so we didn't want to play. So I guess what it would take for me to play the best deck it's two things. Like, it has to be resilient to targeted hate, which I believe this deck is, but it also cannot, like, there can be no easy way out for someone who wants to beat it. Like, a lot of time, you know, if you want to beat the best deck, you have to make your deck so bad that it's not worth it. And then I want to play the best deck. But Mardu is a deck that beats the best deck, and it's still a good deck. So we thought that a lot of people would go that route, which we did, and so we didn't want to play it.
Now, I think there's a great piece of Magic terminology buried in that answer, macro archetype. Why don't you explain to people at home who might not know what that means, what you're talking about when you say a macro archetype?
Well, in my mind, I split archetypes, not official, but as in, like, aggro, combo, and control. And then there's also, like, it's a spectrum. There's stuff in the middle. But yeah, aggro is just aggressive. You want to be attacking, you're proactive. You don't really care what your opponent's doing. So it's very good for when you don't know what they're doing, because you don't have to react to them. Your game plan is just the same all the time. They have to react to you. Control is the opposite. You're reacting to what people do. It's really hard to play control in an unknown meta game because, you know, you have to choose if you're going to play Negate or Radiant Flames in your deck. And then if you play against a different archetype, those cards are going to be horrible or they're going to be great. So control is usually better in a more established meta game. And then there is combo, which is, you know, a wild card. It can be anything. Usually you're proactive too, but you run the risk of people hating you out and then you lose to a single card. Or, you know, you spike, you hit the jackpot, no one has hate, and you win the tournament. So those are the three macro archetypes in my mind.
Okay. Well, there you have it. Paulo Vitor Domodoroso, one of the best players in the history of the game, Hall of Famer, and inventing new Magic terminology as we go through this tournament, sending it back to the news desk and Rich Hagon.
How do you spell macro? Macro archetype. Lovely. I've learned something. Okay, so I mentioned that Xiao Zhizhang did it, third time, from China is 4-0. Two players from China at 4-0. Yu Chen Lu is also at 4-0. Great job. Kelvin Chu of Singapore defeated Tom Martell that round to advance to 4-0. Kelvin Chu, part of the reason the MTG Mint card is towards the top of the team standings at this still early stage. But whisper it quietly, someone else who has aced their draft pod and now begun with a win in Constructed, the GOAT, the greatest of all time, John Finkel, is 4-0. Well, it's deck tech time here at the Pro Tour for the first time. Let's get into the world of Standard. Waiting for us across the studio is Paul Cheon, and he is with our very own Gabby Sparks.